Defence Dialogue, a podcast discussing contemporary challenges in the area of European security and defence. Brought to you by the Martin Centre with Nicholas Novacki.
Welcome everyone to the first episode of the Martin Centre's Defence Dialogue podcast series of 2021. My name is Dr. Nicholas Novacki, and with me here today I have my colleague Alvaro de la Cruz. Welcome, Alvaro.
Thank you, and Happy New Year.
New year, new tricks, and we hope that all of you had a pleasant and relaxing holiday, and your year has started in a rather pleasant way, like despite the ongoing struggles with the coronavirus that we're still facing. In the defense field, I mean, this year has brought in new issues, new developments, and there will be many new questions that we will be discussed in this episode series this year. But the issue that I wanted to focus on this first episode is the new leadership in Washington, D.C., and more specifically the election of Joe Biden, whose inauguration took place on the 20th of January, and who has now started his term in office. And Trump's defeat in the elections and Biden's victory is something that was very much welcomed, obviously, throughout most parts of Europe, because most European countries saw that Biden will again bring a degree of normality into the transatlantic relationship, into the relations between the European Union and the United States. I don't think many European countries ever got over the fact that Trump at one point also labeled the European Union as a foe of the United States in the area of trade. So having someone in the White House who's actively speaking positively of the European Union and its contribution to international multilateralism is very welcomed in Europe as well. And Biden is obviously a strong champion of the transatlantic relationship, of NATO, of a strong defense relationship with Europe, and this is obviously something that is very warmly welcomed by Europeans. And I think the agenda in front of Biden and his European allies is quite not daunting, but I mean there are certainly a whole bunch of challenges that need to be addressed. I mean, now that Trump has left office, beginning from the restoration of unity, within the transatlantic relationship, not just within NATO, but within the broader transatlantic framework. And as I said already, it's the Trump years were rather dramatic for I would say most European countries. There were certainly some that benefited and valued the Trump administration in Europe, but for the most part, the traditional European countries, the traditional leaders of the transatlantic relationship in Europe, such as France and Germany, they certainly saw their relations with Washington being downgraded a bit under Trump. So, going forward, Biden has promised that he's going to focus on restoring the traditional alliances, with the traditional European powers. He has already committed to a strong and vibrant NATO, which are all things that Europeans obviously love and cherish. But I think Europeans shouldn't be too infatuated by the new Biden administration and what they hear from him. What I mean by that is that they should also remember that Biden will, while he will certainly speak in a different way, I mean, he will also expect many things from the Europeans. Starting from defense spending, for example. I think we will absolutely hear from the administration that Europeans need to continue to do more to take care of their own security, to make the transatlantic burden sharing a bit more equitable between the United States and Europe, and so that Europe wouldn't always have to rely on the US security guarantees, like whenever something happens. And in addition to this, I think the agenda on also the EU side might be a little bit challenging. We heard already during the confirmation hearings, or during the Secretary of Defense nominee Lloyd Austin, that the United States will continue to be a little bit careful about some of the new EU defense initiatives, such as permanent structured cooperation and the European Defense Fund, and would like there to be a fair access to US companies and the United States into these initiatives. So in that field, we'll probably won't see a huge change of policy compared to the Trump administration, although there have been some reports that the United States might be considering actual participation in permanent structured cooperation. But still, I mean, I think it's very unlikely that there will be a huge and dramatic change of policy when it comes to US involvement in the EU defense initiatives. Other things, I think also the Conference for Democracies that Biden has proposed, will be something that Europeans absolutely have to address and show support for Biden, or at least the United States expects that Europeans will support this initiative. And it will be interesting to see how different European countries will react to this initiative and how they will approach it. So far, we haven't really heard too much from different European countries. From what we have heard so far is rather mixed. Some are quite enthusiastic, some are less so, it's very difficult to say at the moment what a common European approach towards the conference might be. But again, I think this is a worthy initiative that Europeans should show support for Biden as a goodwill demonstration towards the new administration. And then perhaps lastly, before I finish these opening remarks, the issue of China. If you listen to some of the confirmation hearings, for example, in the confirmation hearing of Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, the issue of China was brought up very, very much, quite often. And I think it's clear that China will be one of those issues that will occupy this administration as well, much more than say Russia. And this is can be a little bit challenging for Europe because Europeans usually tend to approach the issue of China a little bit differently from the United States. So Europeans have been a little bit less hawkish on China compared to the United States, chosen to emphasize that China is both a systemic rival and a partner in trade and economics. But given how the new administration is continuing the previous Trump administration's rather hawkish line on China, I think the United States will expect more from its European allies when it comes to addressing the challenge of China, also in the context of NATO. And here again, it would be great if Europeans had a little bit more an effective common strategy. So I'll leave it there. And now we'll jump into the dialogue.
Great, thank you, Nicholas. It was a great topic indeed for this, especially this week, after a few days of the inauguration of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. So the first question, it's a pretty obvious one, but it needs to be addressed. Is Biden election going to kill EU's strategic autonomy? Do you think President Macron will be able to reboost or continue pushing for this, not only military, but on other fields also, European independence and autonomy from the Americans? what do you foresee for 2021, 2022, or at least the 2 first years of the Biden's mandate?
No, I don't think. I mean, the election of Biden will kill off the strategic autonomy agenda at all. I think it's important to remember that the strategic autonomy agenda in defense is something that predates Trump's election in 2016 quite a bit. I mean, the first time it appeared in EU Council conclusions, the ambition of strategic autonomy is from 2013, if I remember correctly, and then it was introduced in a major way in the 2016 EU global strategy that was published in June of that year, which was a time in which nobody seriously thought that Trump would become president in November. Trump certainly accelerated some of that, I would say, but he wasn't the cause of it, and Biden will not take that drive away either. I think the main reason is that Europe has realized that it needs to be able to do more by itself. It needs to be able to take care of its own security better, and it needs to become an effective international actor. And things like the coronavirus pandemic, I mean, the initial difficulties when it came in the area of security of supply of masks, ventilators, and now the challenges we're seeing in the distribution of the vaccine, all underscore the importance of autonomous European Union or strategic autonomy. But the key thing is that the strategic autonomy agenda is no longer just about defense. I mean, in 2013, 2016, I mean, it was really a defense concept. But nowadays, we're hearing about open strategic autonomy in trade. We're hearing about strategic autonomy in the digital sphere and in the technological sphere. And it has become to characterize almost every aspect of EU policy, to the extent that almost everything the EU is doing these days is about strategic autonomy. And I think this is fine, but I think the key challenge for Brussels will be to kind of pursue the strategic autonomy agenda in a way that doesn't make it seem that the main reason for this is to pursue autonomy from the United States. This is not the case at all. I mean, Europe needs to become a more effective and responsible international actor, so that it can handle its own challenges and be a more effective manager of crisis in its own immediate neighborhood, not because of the United States. And I would say that the United States has even been an enabler of the EU's strategic autonomy, rather than an impediment for it. And I think that's really important to underscore.
Taking into consideration that the UK just officially completely left the EU, that they're not apparently willing to collaborate that much for now on the defense level, that also Germany's leadership is yet to be seen whether they keep a strong role or not after Merkel's departure. From whom in Europe, besides France, could we expect some leadership, some call to action for the rest of the member states? Are we going into a different scenario in which smaller countries such as Ireland, because of the privileged position now towards the United States, or the Baltics because of their necessity to invest more time, effort, and money into defense is required? Are we going towards a multilateral defense scheme rather than a strong leadership by big European countries? What do you think?
Well, I think the role of the big European countries, the traditional powers like France and Germany, will be absolutely key going forward as well, and not just because Biden has emphasized that he wants to restore the U.S. relations with these powers, and we saw I think yesterday or the day before that Biden released like some small notes from the course that like he had with Chancellor Merkel and President Macron, and like they're already working on like trying to like rebuild these relations. But in addition to that, I mean, obviously the Eastern European countries and Poland could as well. I mean, could play a role when it comes, an important role, like when it comes to highlighting the challenge of Russia. I mean, this is an issue that like the Baltic states, Poland, and others have usually championed like very strongly in Washington and in the context of NATO. Also, the Nordics, even though they're not in like Sweden and Finland, not in NATO, but Norway and Denmark are like collectively like they can champion greater focus to the Arctic region, for example. So I think smaller countries, I mean, can have a good amount of influence, but I mean, this usually depends on like them working together. Ireland is a little bit special case because they have such a strong cultural link to the United States. So I mean, I think it'll be interesting to see. I mean, how the Irish kind of link to the United States, I mean, will affect or allow them to shape policies, or how the Americans under Biden like will engage Ireland and Brexit.
Probably it's a little bit more subjective because of my Spanish conscience, but transatlantic relations have always been very focused on Europe-US alliance. But we should remind that transatlantic relations also involve a good list of South American, Latin American countries that were a little bit out of the equation, also because of Trump's policy towards the south of the continent. Do you think Biden's election is an opportunity to relaunch the also military collaboration with some Latin American states for Europe too?
Well, it's absolutely true that, I mean, the transatlantic relationship is broader than just the United States and Europe, and we have Canada in the north as well. It's an interesting question. I'm not sure like what the Biden administration's like plans for Latin America are, but I mean, I think it would certainly be good that, I mean, while there is this drive to like rebuild the relationship between Europe and the United States, that Europe could also like develop new ways of engaging like Latin America, like alone, but then also like in a cooperation with the United States. I think that would be hugely beneficial for both sides.
Beyond of course the most obvious topics that are on the international board now that the Biden administration is expected to take care of once again, like for example Iran or even North Korea, even if Trump's efforts were let's say enormous. There's probably one more immediate and more urgent for Europe issue that we should discuss about Turkey and their membership to NATO, and how Biden's administration could evolve towards their membership, their influence by Putin. We know that they're trying to negotiate some relaunch of their relations with Greece. What do you think Europe could do to ensure that they don't fall into Putin's sphere of control?
Good question. I think Europe has, or the European Union, like has pursued quite a strong, unified position to what it perceives as like Turkey's like provocative behavior in the Eastern Mediterranean. So I think in that area, I mean, the Europe's position is already quite good. It'll be interesting to see, I mean, what Turkey also thinks of this proposed conference for democracies that like Biden has been talking and that the administration is seeking to launch this year. and like how the administration will engage countries that have done some like backsliding when it comes to like these core, what it considers as like core democratic values and principles like in the past years. But when it comes to Turkey's NATO membership, though, I mean, I think it's then we enter a little bit problematic area. Like if we start to discuss about the potentiality of excluding like some members from the alliance based on like their domestic political developments. I don't think it would set a good precedent. Like if for transatlantic unity and the credibility of like NATO's deterrence, if a country like would be kicked out of the alliance, like even though I mean it has done some democratic backsliding. I think these are issues that are much better to discuss and solve like in the framework of the alliance, like than outside of it. And in this sense, like I really welcome the NATO 2030 report that was published at the end of last year, and that also like called for slightly more political role for NATO, called for more consultations to take place within the alliance, also when it comes to the respect of fundamental values and principles that most members of the alliance share.
We all hope for that. It's indeed an interesting year and a lot of interesting things to come. Probably we'll discuss them more in depth in this series. Either way, the only conclusion I have is that it feels so good to have the US back in our side, and thank you very much for having me once again.
Likewise, and let's hope that like Europe uses this opportunity to the best of its abilities. Cheers.
That was today's episode of Defence Dialogue. Subscribe to our podcasts for more.